Get it? Because now I'm capless. Welcome back, everybody, to Olive Boy Pens and episode 2 of the Capless Comparison series. In the first episode, I took a look at capless pens from 3 different brands: the Modern Pilot Vanishing Point, the Platinum Curidas, and the Lamy Dialogue 3. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at 3 capless pens from the same manufacturer, but spaced out over 30-ish years in between models. That's right, folks. We are going to be looking at the original Pilot capless from 1963, the Namiki faceted capless from the 1980s, 1990s, and, of course, as kind of a benchmark, you know it, you love it, you're indifferent to it, the Modern Pilot Vanishing Point. I'm really excited to take a look at these. The Namiki is one I've had for a little bit. The original Pilot capless is on loan from a friend. Thanks, Mike, for this one. And I'm really excited to show you guys the evolution of this pretty iconic model over the last, however many years? 80 years? No, that can't be right. 60? This isn't a math channel, this is a pens channel, as you are probably very clear on now. All that aside, we're going to do an overview of each of these pens. We're going to write with them a little bit, and then in the same way as I did in the first episode of this series, we're going to pit them against each other on the basis of, practicality, everyday use, writing comfort, all those nice things that you would look at if you were looking into a pen for purchase. All right, let's get right into it. Alrighty, let's take a look at these 3. Starting with the one that you will likely have the most experience with, the Modern Vanishing Point. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because I spent a fair amount of time on it in the last episode of the Capless Comparison, but just as an overview, it is a brass lacquered pen with a clip at the front. The body weighs about 30 grams. The grip is about 12 millimeters at the grip, and it has these little divots where your fingers should rest. As I mentioned in the previous video, it's a little hard to get used to the clip orientation on this one, but it is kind of necessary because, if you have the nib facing down in your pocket, you run the risk of leaking ink, and nobody wants that. Now, for the slightly older version, so first thing you might notice is this is actually a Namiki branded pen. A lot of Pilot pens used to be under the Namiki name, but then Namiki kind of shifted up in price bracket to, super high-end Urushi lacquered pens, and these Vanishing Points kind of became Pilot pens. So you can find these Pilot marked, I believe. The body is made out of plastic, and it's got these really nice facets, and then it's got stainless steel trims. This one weighs a lot less, being plastic. It's 19 grams, and the grip is also thinner. It's closer in size to the Vanishing Point Decimo, which is the thinner version of the Vanishing Point. I do not have that on hand, though. This is 10.5 millimeters at the grip, and they are about the same length. I believe the faceted one is maybe 1 or 2 millimeters shorter. Yeah, I also like the clip a little bit more on this one just because it blends really well into the front of the pen. It follows the same shape all the way throughout, and it doesn't seem to get in the way of my grip quite as much as the other Vanishing Point. Finally, the oldest of the 3. So, this is the original Pilot Vanishing Point, first introduced in 1963. This was a really expensive pen when it was first made, and you can kind of tell just because of how modern it feels. It's an aluminum-bodied pen with a couple of plastic pieces here and there, and just feels very like space agey. These little pins are nylon, and they kind of center the whole mechanism in there. This one, it is metal, so it's heavier than the faceted one, but not quite as heavy as the brass vanishing point at 28 grams. This one, you may notice, does not have a clip on the top or actually on the bottom. That is because this model it's missing the clip, but I'll put an image of what that would normally look like here. It's a tiny little clasp clip, very similar to fans of the channel will recognize the Schaefer Tuckaway. I can't personally attest to how this feels in hand because I don't have one with a clip on it, but just from seeing how my hand rests, I don't see how that would get in the way much. That being said, that bottom placement did really bother me on the Platinum Curried S, and eventually it led to me selling it, so who knows. At the moment though, this is a pretty comfortable pen, even if it is a little bit longer when deployed because it doesn't get any shorter, which I will explain in just a moment here. So now that we've gotten a look at what the bodies are cosmetically, let's see how these pens work. So the modern Vanishing Point and the older faceted one are both clicky pens, very satisfying. So, they get a little shorter when you open them. Very quick and easy to deploy, very good everyday use type of situation. They also both unscrew at the middle section to reveal modern converters. I've got a Con 40 in the newest Vanishing Point, which is, my least favorite converter. And then I've got the Con 20, which is a discontinued converter, but it is still considered modern because it still fits in everything that Pilot still makes. It's a squeeze converter. These nib units are actually interchangeable in between the two, which is great, especially, if you come across one of these and the nib unit's not good, you can just buy a new one. These also both take Pilot modern cartridges. Now, the original Vanishing Point is not like either of these. It is a twist open pen. So you twist the whole back half of the body and the nib comes out. It does have a little sealing door. So you see that kind of hides away. So it's cool. You can't really open it, one-handed, but it is very similar to the Lamy Dialogue 3 in that way. Feels pretty solid. And instead of screwing apart like a Dialogue 3 does, it actually just kind of pulls off. And that reveals a totally different nib unit. And you see I had to twist it out a little bit there, similar to a Curried S actually. But the nib unit and nib look totally unique to the modern nib units. Pretty funky shape, honestly. It's got a little gasket there at the front. I believe that's for sealing. This little pin here is what connects it to the mechanism inside. See that little arrow there to tell you which way to put it in. And then this converter right here, although it looks very similar to the Con 20, it's actually called a Con W. And these are actually very rare, very hard to come by, and can be expensive if you find them. What's also interesting is that these take the older style of Pilot cartridge called the double spare. So what you can do is, and I'll put a picture up here, you have two cartridges separated by a little spacer, and you just swap them out instead of having one big long cartridge like you do on a modern Pilot. And I think that's pretty interesting. It can be a little finicky to get this in right. I've almost messed it up a couple of times, but I think that was right. And yeah, I was a little concerned at first about just like having it pull off, but it stays on really solidly. It feels similar to like how a clutch cap on a vintage pen would feel. You also may notice these beautiful little details on here. It's kind of hard to tell, but these little etched arrows in the Pilot logo. Very space agey, very cool. Overall, I really like the design of this pen. Now, let's get to some writing. These are all different nib sizes, and, it's not going to be super comparable, but, what would a pen review be without a writing sample? The modern Vanishing Point takes an 18 karat gold nib unit, and it is available in a variety of sizes from extra fine to a stub in a couple of different finishes. So there's a silver, rhodium plated, a black, and then a gold. This particular one is an extra fine. It's the same one I used in my original video. And I'm using Pilot Blue, though it's been in here for a while, so it's a little bit darker. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this nib. I've still kept it around just because I knew I was going to make this video at some point, but Anyway, yeah. I think something's wrong with the cap seal on this guy, which is why it causes that ink to oxidize so fast. But, you know, if I was using it more often, it would probably not have that issue. So that's partially on me. Next up, the faceted vanishing point. This is a customized nib, so it was originally the Namiki marked 14K medium, but it has been ground to kind of like a hybrid architect blade grind, kind of my preferred nib style for a pen I use a lot, and I do use this one a lot. Namiki Capless. This is a medium blade, I guess, and it's a 14 karat gold. Also using, or actually this one is Mont Blanc Starwalker, which is a bottle that I got recently when I was in San Francisco. It is a very nice blue-black and, you know, is very well behaved, as all Mont Blanc inks are. This nib I find to be a little bit bouncier than the 18 karat nibs, so I prefer it for that reason. And just generally, this pen is a lot more comfortable to write with. It feels not exactly like a normal, you know, non-capless pen, but closer than a modern vanishing point does. It doesn't take that much to get used to the grip versus a modern one. And last but certainly not least, we've got the Pilot Capless from 1963. With a 14K fine nib. I was surprised at how much I like this nib. It feels, and don't make fun of me for this, it feels like a vintage nib. It's got a kind of feedback that I find more common in vintage pens. I don't really know how to describe it, but if you've used a vintage pen, you would know. It's got decent flow. And it's using a Pilot Blue. But yeah, it's got some feedback. It's not super smooth, but it's feels very controlled, and I appreciate that. And it's, you know, not scratchy in any particular direction. Plus, you know, the fact that it's just an entirely round barrel, it feels similar to like holding like a Lamy 2000. More so than either of these pens. It feels very, very normal. I'm sure that would be different if it had the clip on the bottom there, but this one feels the most like just a pen, you know? If that makes any sense. It feels the most, it would take the least getting used to, I think, in terms of user experience. So yeah, that pretty much does it for the writing samples. Now let's pit them against each other. So, first things first, we're going to be pitting these pens against each other on the terms of practicality. For me, the winner of this one is the modern vanishing point. That's because not only is it the kind of heaviest, most solid feeling pen, it's also a modern pen, which, you know, as much as I hate to admit it, there are advantages to that. Advantages being, it is more easily replaceable. It's also, you know, more durable, and more commonly available. Yeah, just generally more commonly available. That isn't to say that the, you know, faceted vanishing point isn't, you know, pretty much functionally the exact same pen. And I honestly probably carry the faceted vanishing point more often. It's just that I feel more nervous when I'm carrying this. And part of the reason is, I'll get to that in the build, but it is also a plastic pen. The 1963 vanishing point, I wouldn't leave the house with it. And that's because I mean, this particular one's missing a clip, so that kind of, you know, takes it out of the running for me. It's also longer, so it doesn't, you know, fit, it doesn't pocket as well. And it's also just a rare kind of special pen. Not that that's ever stopped me before, but I don't trust myself to carry this very, you know, uncommon pen all around. Plus the fact that it's kind of hard to open with one hand. I don't think this is the one for me. Next up, we're going to be talking about the build of these pens. This is a tough one because it is pretty subjective, but I do have some notes here that I will mention. As much as I, again, don't really like how the Vanishing Point Modern stands up in terms of, like, you know, quality of finish and, like, part breaks and that kind of thing, it is the most solid one. And, you know, it can be dropped and banged around, and, you know, you could put it in your pocket and not necessarily worry about it too much. Whereas something like the faceted capless might have some issues there. Notably, these are known to crack, especially on the back half here where it meets the middle section, and also on the front half. And this one actually does have a crack in it. And let me see if I can focus on it. Right there. So this was welded back together, and now it's super solid. I was very lucky that it's not on the back half, because this is, you know, the half that unscrews. But I'm always a little apprehensive to carrying this out and about, just because it is known to crack. If I dropped this, it could very easily crack. It is, you know, whatever, 30-year-old plastic at this point. It very much is a vintage pen in that way. Interestingly enough, besides the lack of clip here, this is a solid pen. It's aluminum. You know, it's clearly lived a pretty long life. It's got some, you know, paint chips, and it looks kind of like an old decommissioned spaceship. So weirdly, this is the number 2 for me, even though I just said I wouldn't carry it out of the house. If I had to, I would probably carry this more often than the faceted capless. Finally, we're going to be talking about price. This is kind of a tough one because 2 of these pens are not currently in production. You know, as I've stated in the previous one, modern Vanishing Point around 160, though you can spend up to like 600 or 700 if you want to get a Raden Maki version. However, where it gets complicated is these ones. So these are vintage pens. You can find them on eBay for cheap, but you might not find them or not cheap. You can find them on eBay for a good deal if you want, but then you're going about the risk of, you know, not knowing really anything about the pen until you have it on hand. And at that point, it's often, you know, anyone's guess. This was one such eBay find. I bought it for about $130, which I was very pleased about because these normally go for above $200. For the rarer colors, you know, you can pay easily up to $350. I've even seen there's an all black stealth version with like black trims. I've seen that go, you know, above $400. And that's kind of crazy to me, being that it's a plastic Vanishing Point. And that's why I love it, but it is plastic, you know, it's inherently more fragile. Keep that in mind. These can get pricey. If you get lucky, look out for cracks. They're sometimes fixable, but you know, it can be risky. And lastly, these are super rare. I haven't found a lot of data on pricing these, but you know, a couple $100, especially for one in super mint condition, sounds about right to me. So definitely keep that in mind as you are shopping for one of these. They can get a little expensive. So yeah, it all depends on your budget pretty much. I'm not going to say that any of these are priced better. I feel like, you know, maybe the faceted Vanishing Point can be a little bit overpriced sometimes, but that's just my opinion. Some people might find that they're, you know, worth the price. That's all up to you. Well, I very much hope you enjoyed this look at 3 very special pens. I had a lot of fun doing this one. I hope I can find some models to fill in the years in between these ones, or, you know, capless pens from different manufacturers, so I can continue this series. It's been really fun to take a deep dive at a certain type of pen. I'm also going to be doing more vintage versus modern, like the Parker 51 video. Namely, I will be looking at some pens from Sheaffer. Next up will be the Sheaffer Pen for Men, which you may know that I'm a big fan of, versus the 2021 Sheaffer Legacy, which is a very slick looking pen. And we're going to be pitting those against each other, similar to how I did with the 51 and with these Vanishing Points, frankly. So look forward to that. And thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to check out some more cool stuff. And yeah, as always, I always appreciate your support. I'll see you around.